Today we're diving into one of the most emotional, most human stories in the entire biblical narrative, the book of Jeremiah. This is a heavy one. It's all about a prophet with a mission that seems absolutely impossible. He's stuck between a God whose heart is breaking and a people who just refuse to listen, and they're all on a collision course with disaster. Let's get into it.
Seriously, just imagine this for a second. What if you were told you had to go to everyone you know, your family, your friends, your entire country, and tell them they're headed for total destruction? And, oh, by the way, the only way to survive is to surrender to your most hated enemy. Yeah, that was Jeremiah's job. That was the core of his entire life's work.
So this guy, Jeremiah, he's often called the weeping prophet, and for good reason. He lived during the chaotic final days of the kingdom of Judah, and his life was just this whirlwind of political drama, intense personal suffering, and this undeniable divine calling. And trust me, this story isn't just some dusty piece of ancient history. It's a really powerful look at what faith and failure and real hope look like, especially when times get dark.
Okay, so to really get a grip on Jeremiah's story, we've got to understand the world he was thrown into. We're going to start right at the beginning, the moment he got the job he never asked for, and the political storm that came with it.
Jeremiah's career kicks off around 627 BC, and the whole region is basically a powder keg. The old superpower, Assyria, is falling apart. There's this new, absolutely ruthless power, Babylon, rising up in the east. And at the same time, Egypt is trying to claw its way back to the top. Judah? Well, Judah is stuck right in the middle of this massive power struggle, and the choices its leaders are about to make, they're going to be fatal.
So right in the middle of all this geopolitical chaos, a young man named Jeremiah gets this incredible, life-changing call from God. And just listen to this message. It's a message of profound destiny, that he was chosen, he was set apart for this exact task before he was even born.
But Jeremiah's reaction? It's so human, it's almost painful. He doesn't jump at the chance, not at all. He's full of doubt, he's scared. He basically says, "You've got the wrong guy. I'm too young. I don't even know how to speak properly." He felt completely unqualified for the job, a feeling I'm sure a lot of us can relate to. Now here's what's so fascinating. God gives him this mission, and it has two totally different sides to it. On one hand, he's there to uproot and tear down, which, sounds pretty terrifying. But he's also there to build and to plant. So right from the very beginning, this message of destruction was tied together with a deep promise of future restoration.
But here's the thing. Before any of that building could happen, the demolition had to start. For decades, Jeremiah's main job was to deliver a message of judgment, a harsh warning that pretty much nobody, from the king in his palace to the person on the street, wanted to hear.
So why was this judgment coming? Well, the nation's corruption it was everywhere. They were worshiping other gods, they were making these foolish political deals instead of trusting God, they were exploiting the poor and the vulnerable, and their whole religious life had become nothing more than an empty, hollow show.
And this brings us to one of Jeremiah's most explosive moments. He goes and stands right at the gates of the temple in Jerusalem. This is the very heart of their national identity, their whole faith. And he drops this bombshell. The people thought that just having the temple around made them safe, but Jeremiah calls them out. He basically accuses them of turning God's house into a hideout for criminals.
Jeremiah wasn't just a speaker. He was kind of like a performance artist for God. He would do these bizarre, symbolic things in public to really drive his message home. Like, he once wore a heavy wooden ox yoke around his own neck to show the people, look, you need to submit to Babylon to survive. You can only imagine how many friends that won him.
So, as you can probably guess, being so public and so confrontational came with a huge personal price tag. This next part is all about the intense suffering Jeremiah had to endure just for being faithful to his mission.
The pushback was just brutal. He was mocked in the streets, he was arrested, he was beaten. Even his own family turned against him. You had all these other false prophets running around, telling people what they wanted to hear, and they'd publicly call him a liar. And at his absolute lowest point, government officials had him thrown into a muddy pit and just left him there to die.
So why? Why did he keep going? This quote right here is the answer. Even with all the pain, all the loneliness, he said he felt this divine pressure that he just couldn't ignore. He describes God's message as a fire burning inside his heart, a fire that he just couldn't hold in, even when he really, really wanted to.
And then, after 40 long years of warnings, the day Jeremiah had been talking about finally came. The climax of this story is just as tragic and as absolute as you can imagine.
586 BC, that's the year. That's the year everything came crashing down. The Babylonian army, after a long, brutal siege, finally broke through the walls of Jerusalem.
The city was completely ransacked. The magnificent temple, the one built by Solomon, was burned to the ground. The people who survived were rounded up and forced to march into a long, painful exile in Babylon. Every single thing Jeremiah had warned them about for 40 years had come true in the most horrific way possible.
But, and this is so important, the story doesn't end in the ashes. Remember that second part of his mission, to build and to plant? Right in the middle of all this destruction, Jeremiah delivered his most powerful message of hope.
Literally, while this city is still smoldering, Jeremiah comes forward with this promise of a new covenant, and it's one of the most important prophecies in the entire Old Testament. God promises a future where his law isn't just some external list of rules, but an internal reality, something written directly on the human heart. What made this so revolutionary was the incredible shift it signaled. It was a move away from an external system of rituals and towards an internal transformation of the heart. From just following rules to actually having a relationship. It promised a future of total forgiveness and a brand new beginning that would echo throughout the rest of history. And just how much did Jeremiah believe in this hope for the future? Well, while the Babylonian army was literally camped outside the city walls, he did another one of his symbolic acts. He bought a plot of land. I mean, can you imagine? It was this radical, almost crazy act of faith, a tangible sign that he truly believed God would, one day, bring his people back home.
So what do we take away from this epic, gut-wrenching story? Well, for one, that God is ultimately in control of history. That a true, transformed heart matters way more than just going through religious motions. It shows us that it is possible to be faithful even when it costs you everything. And maybe most importantly, that God's plans always include hope, even on the other side of the fiercest judgment. Jeremiah's job was to speak a necessary but deeply unpopular truth to his generation. And that kind of leaves us with a question to chew on, doesn't it? What are the necessary truths that we find the hardest to hear today?
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us.